Great. Good morning, everybody. I've just had the thumbs up from the team here that we can start our conference today. Welcome from me. My name's Tim Bissett. I'm the director of the St Martin the Fields charity and look after the Frontline network. I am here in central London with the team from the charity who will be navigating people through today's event. In the room, I'm sat with Nat, Amanda, Naomi, Faye, Rachel, Becky, and Mark. You may meet those people on some of the sessions this afternoon, but they're here to guide us through today. And I'm also going to be joined by our keynote speaker shortly, Jean Templeton, who will be speaking to us as our first keynote speaker as part of our plenary session. So I'm delighted to have almost 700 people registered for today's event. I know that people will come and go during the day, but we hope that it will be a really fruitful day and that we have really packed sessions, which I hope people will find of great benefit. Our theme for today is working together. And at this year's event, we're going to hear from a range of people who are working together right across the UK, whether this is with colleagues, peer support networks, experts by experience, across agencies and sectors or different areas of the country. Through working collaboratively, they are overcoming barriers and ensuring that people have the best possible support. Today, we want to recognize the important work that you are doing as frontline workers and provide a space for learning and reflection. And we do hope that you enjoy today and find it super useful. We all know that we need to work together, both as we respond to the immediate needs in our day-to-day roles and to achieve real systematic change around homelessness. So there's plenty to take away from today. We hope you find the information that we give you useful. The event's been recorded, so if there's anything that you miss and you want to go back elsewhere, you'll be able to do that after today. So a few little bits about today. Yes, we've got a packed session, but at the same time, we appreciate that people might not be able to stay for the whole event. So please come and go to the sessions that you feel most appropriate for you. We have factored in some breaks and lunch through the day. So again, feel free to do what you need to during the day so that you'll be able to come in and out and see us and make sure that you are there at the start for each event and then you can join in. And all of the sessions are run as webinars. So as I say, we're going to record these. You can watch them later. But don't worry if you couldn't decide on which session to do, come back later and watch them again. And we'll be using Zoom throughout the day. I hope people are very familiar with that now. You can use the chat box to make comments and the question and answer box as well. When we come to the end of sessions, it's often the question and answer box, which is the most useful. That enables us to tick off and make sure that we see questions early and answer those as best as we can. And lastly, there'll be a parallel conversation going on Twitter. We are at St Martins_Frontline, SMITF_Frontline is our Twitter handle. And if you use the hashtag working together, you'll be able to gather the conversation together. So we have a fantastic lineup for you today. Shortly, I'll just be providing an update on what we as the St Martin's charity have been up to and the Frontline network. And I'm delighted to welcome Jean, who's the Chief Executive of St Basil's, as our keynote speaker. And as I say, Jean will be joining us shortly. Our morning session, we're going to share information, resources and best practice about some specific aspects of homelessness, including a session around women's experience of homelessness, the cost of living crisis, about multiple disadvantage and co-occurring conditions, and immigration and homelessness. Then we'll have a short break for lunch, and then afterwards, sessions will focus on frontline resilience and practical tips to support your well-being. This includes webinars about workload management, reflective practice, psychologically informed environments, and looking after your mental health whilst working on the front line. And finally, we'll come back together at the end of the day for a brilliant panel session with representatives from across all 4 nations. And that will be at about 3:45. So it will be great to end your day by joining us again for that channel session. So to get us in the mood, people know here that we always love an icebreaker, and just to find out who's here, this is kind of a tradition on our conferences to always do this. And as ever, we're going to use Mentimeter to try and do this. Really easy. If you are very techie, you can scan the QR code, which is on the screen at the moment, and that'll take you straight to our Mentimeter poll. If you're a bit more straightforward, and this is the way I did it, just go to menti.com and you'll be asked for a code, and the code is 8943153. So just have a go at doing that for a moment. And when you've arrived, I'm pausing and looking across the room. Let's just start by saying, tell us your name. Let's see who we've got on the call today. Drop your name in there and we'll see who we've got appear in a shiny cloud. I wonder if that means that Amanda is the most frequent name because it's the biggest. I don't know if it does. Welcome, Louise. We've got Gareth, Tash, Mark, John. Don't be shy doing this because it's kind of good fun and really, really easy. We've got Veronica, Tanya, Kathy, Andrew. Maybe we have lots of Lisas and Helens because that's now got kind of big. Great, thank you. It's very easy to do this. So if you've not done it before, just dive in and have a go. Okay, next question. In theory, we've got people right across the UK. So let's see if we can prove that. Where are you in the UK today? I think you can just poke the screen. Click where you are. Northern Ireland is up here. We've got people in Scotland, way southwest. Lots of people north of the border. Wales has appeared. Anyone east? Oh yes, East Anglia, I think with somebody just close to the Wash. Popped up. London is possible. That looks pretty popular. North East, Northwest, we have people there. Trying to see who's far, far north. We definitely go north of the border. I think that's kind of across the Glasgow-Edinburgh band, where you would expect people to be, I guess. I don't think there's anywhere been. Great. I think that is 4 nations coverage. I'm really pleased to see that. So my next question is, have you attended a Frontline Network event before? Is this your first one? Have you been before? Looks like we have a lot of new people here for the first time. It's almost neck and neck, but the no's have it. If you're here for the first time, you are very, very welcome. Still moving, still a few people there. Do remember to have a look at our website after this. There's always events happening throughout the year. Some will be close to you, some will be online. Some might even be worth traveling for, but do keep checking that. Okay, one more question. Just imagine you had 25 hours in a day. How would you spend that extra hour? You've got one more hour. Maybe it's for yourself, maybe it's for work, maybe it's just something what you wanted to do. How might you spend your extra hour? Reading, sleeping, lots of sleep, lots of reading, knitting, family time, talking to my partner. Wow, an extra hour to talk to your partner every day is a great idea. Chilling, praying with family. No one said in front of Zoom. Isn't that extraordinary? I can't imagine why. Pottery is a nice thing to do. Great movie. You might have to miss the credits if you're going to do it in an hour, but that's a good idea. The gardens are going to improve across the nation in that extra hour. Family time is important. Self-care, looking after yourself. I think lots of these are around looking after yourself. That's a really nice thing for people to do. Watching television. Crochet is a great thing. Outdoor exercise. Overthrowing the government. Okay. Crack on with that. You can make a start in the first hour. Terrific. Thank you. So we'll be using tools like Mentimeter during the day. You've now kind of got the hang of that. I hope you find that useful, and it's a good way of interacting with people. So let me just tell you a little bit about what has been happening in the Frontline network before I welcome our keynote speaker. I know that obviously we see that there's a number of people here who are here for the first time. I can see some familiar names and familiar faces there, but it's been a busy year since our last conference, and I thought, well, I couldn't resist the opportunity really to share some of our work with you and the things that we've been doing. So for those of you who are new, we launched the Frontline Network back in 2016 because we recognized that there was more that we could do to support frontline staff working directly with people experiencing homelessness. We recognized that we knew people right across the nation, and we wanted to do something which was effective and supported those people working directly on the front line, delivering services to homeless people across the UK. By frontline staff, we mean anyone who works with people experiencing homelessness, whether or not you're in the public, the statutory or the voluntary sector. For example, you might be working in outreach, in housing, for a charity, as a social worker, in the field of health, or even in the probation service. You know, we kind of think if you're working directly in a professional role, in a frontline position, this is the place, the Frontline Network, where we hope you'll find support in your role. We work both nationally and locally to support staff, and we offer not just opportunities for people to get together and resources for you to do your job effectively, but we also offer funding support so that you can access things that you might otherwise find money to be a barrier. Many of you will know our Vicar's Relief Fund. Everybody in homelessness, I think, knows or has heard of the Vicar's Relief Fund, which provides small, quick grants that prevent eviction and help people access accommodation. And I think many frontline workers will discover the Frontline Network and the St Martin's Charity through the Vicar's Relief Fund in the first instances. And if you don't know, as a frontline worker, you can apply for grants from us on behalf of the person that you're supporting. If you go to the Frontline Network website, you can find access to that. You need to register your organisation, but from then on, you will be able to make grants. And it's a fairly substantial and effective programme. In 21-22, we received 5,074 applications from across the UK. And it's thanks to the generous support of our donors that we were able to make 4,582 grants. And we spent a little over £1.8 million to that, reaching over 7,000 people. If you're a radio listener, you'll have heard talk of the Vicar's Relief Fund on the Christmas appeal on BBC Radio 4 each year. And it's the donors of Radio 4 which largely support our Vicar's Relief Fund. Check it out if you've not done that, and the team will be, I'll be ready, maybe not today, but later this week, to see any new registrations that come through. So as well as providing support for people experiencing homelessness, we're also delighted to relaunch our training fund this year, which supports frontline staff to develop your knowledge and skills where cost would otherwise be a barrier. This is currently open. During 21-22, we provided a little over £20,000 in funding to enable people to undertake training events. About 40 people benefited from that. And really, there's a big choice in things that you may want to do through that training fund. People looked at trauma-informed practice, did work around psychologically informed environments, team building and team resilience, and misuse of substance misuse awareness. It's kind of largely up to you what you choose, and our team will look to turn around those funding applications fairly quickly, so that if there's things that frontline staff want to get onto, you can do it through our training fund. And it's nice to kind of have that back and available to anybody who's part of the Frontline network. And additionally, people may have seen this, we were able to announce that we're funding more organisations across the UK, which directly support our vision, where everyone can have a safe place to call home and the support they need. We made £1.5 million available. We were somewhat overwhelmed with a large number of applications, 81 applications from organisations across the UK, and we were delighted to be able to enter into new funding partnerships with 6 new organisations. And again, they cover England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales, right across the 4 nations. And our partners are Caring in Bristol, TGP Cymru, the Legal Services Agency up in Scotland, AKT, Pathway and Extern across in Northern Ireland. There's more details about that programme on our website, and those projects are underway. We look forward to sharing some of the emerging stories that come from that and some of the practice, and we hope in the future to bring more organisations into that programme. We've also continued to work hard on our local networks, we now have a community of partner organisations right across the UK. If you don't know where they are, I've just got them on the slide there. The furthest north being Cyrenians, easy for me to say, that was difficult this morning. Cyrenians up in Scotland, Path down in Plymouth, and kind of all points in between. It'll be worth just checking out on our website what those organisations are doing and some of their local activity. Even if you're not exactly in those areas, you might still want to see what's happening and take part in some of their events. These are local partner networks which regularly bring staff together around connected activities to share experience, to link with decision makers. And when they work effectively, they can be a powerful tool locally. Last year, we saw as well the launch of 3 new local partners, a new thematic network focusing on women's experiences of homelessness in Leeds, a new partnership to facilitate our existing South Yorkshire Frontline Network, and our first Northern Ireland Frontline Network as well. So it's good to see that developing and growing across the UK. In total, we had about 62 local events last year, alongside 15 national events, providing regular opportunities for frontline staff to come together and affect positive change in the sector, and as importantly, to support one another. You know, it can be a lonely life, a frontline worker working in this world, and if you want to find people who are doing a similar role, who you'll find supportive, I can commend getting involved more deeply in the network as a really good place to start. And if you're based in Scotland, then you might have joined the Frontline event earlier this year to share your views and inform an in-depth response to the Scottish Government's consultation on introducing new duties to prevent homelessness. In Wales, you might have tuned into local meetups exploring how to create a new resilient and valued workforce. If you're down in Brighton, perhaps you went along to learn best practice from the Homeless Health Conference earlier this month. And if you're in Northern Ireland, we have colleagues meeting in Londonderry just this week on Thursday to discuss cost of living and the crisis and the impact that that is having on homelessness, particularly in Northern Ireland. So wherever you are in the UK, wherever you're located, there's opportunities to connect, to share with others, and to share your insights. Lots of our events are recorded, so if you can't get there on the day, do check and go back and in your own time watch those events. And we do attempt to provide as much feedback as we possibly can. So, moving on, another important part of the Frontline Network is our annual survey of frontline workers. Our most recent survey was undertaken in November and December last year, and we received, you know, a really whopping response, over 200 frontline workers contributing to that. And that's where we really want to take the temperature of what's happening on the front line and the experiences that you as frontline workers are seeing. It's a real important litmus test of what's happening out there. We asked lots of questions exploring access to accommodation, support services. We asked about your well-being, and we asked about your professional development as well. And we listened very closely to this survey as we designed the activities that we're going to support within the network in the coming months and years. We know that it's your first-hand insight that helps with all of this, and we'll be publishing the findings of this survey pretty soon. But in the latest survey, let me just share some of the insights that we've got. And you shared in some real creative and resourceful ways in doing that. And it's not just the kind of simple answers to the questions, it's those quotes and those insights that we get from the survey, which is so useful. So some of the quotes here you can read for yourself, but we have worked hard to build relationships with DWP, and they have been responsive. That frontline workers tend to feel supported in their jobs and supported by their colleagues. We've seen some of the benefits of multi-agency working coming through within that, and some real kind of strengths of the sector and how frontline workers work and how they get alongside to work with people affected by homelessness. However, you also highlighted a number of areas where change was needed and where there were some real challenges there as well. So around accommodation, you shared that access to safe and suitable accommodation remains a fundamental issue when trying to address homelessness. The most difficulties were faced when trying to get people into to access specialist accommodation, followed by private sector rented accommodation and social housing. There were particular concerns looking forward to the rising cost of living, and we will be having a session shortly with colleagues at Turn to Us, Child Poverty Action Group and Citizens Advice in Coventry to discuss this as a presenting issue. It's these issues as they come forward that we try and tailor the support that we've got so that there's things there which can help with these barriers and these challenges as they come forward. Support services, well, you highlighted that accessing wider support for people you worked with is also becoming more challenging, particularly in relation to mental health, multiple and complex needs and dual diagnosis. Common barriers, I guess this is not news to people here, are long waiting lists, digital exclusion, and difficulties providing necessary documentation. And so we'll be discussing some of the themes in our up and coming sessions, investigating particularly access to substance use and mental health issues with support with MEME there. And on your own well-being, which remains really, really important to us, and a place I think you can come to receive support when you are considering your own well-being. You shared that high caseloads and lack of time to do your job effectively do impact on your well-being and your ability to support others. Job security and ensuring you felt valued by your employer were also areas for improvement. And our afternoon sessions today will look particularly at this different aspects of well-being, from exploring tools for managing time and discussing how you embed reflective practice and those approaches into your work. So, whilst there's brilliant work taking place across the UK, there is clearly wider challenges and wider change needed if we are to be effective in addressing homelessness and getting people into accommodation. And your insights as frontline staff, the people who are right at the front line doing this work, remain crucial to us and helping us find out what the next steps we should be taking come from you. So we look forward to publishing our full report with frontline workers later this summer. We'll let you know when it's coming and make sure you have a good old read and a look at that when it comes out. And we look forward as well to hearing your feedback on that as well. And finally, coming soon, our team has been working hard to develop our new organisational strategy to guide our activities moving forward. We have resources which we want to use widely, and we want to affect the greatest change that we possibly can. So that strategy that we've been doing, we see as an important tool really to serving frontline workers and supporting you. So we'll be publishing that again in the autumn, and we look forward to sharing that with you, to receiving your feedback, and hopefully you'll be encouraged by that and you'll see that the Frontline network is really there to help. So if you're not familiar with our work, here are the websites. Look at all the resources which are available on the frontlinenetwork.org.uk website. There is literally years and years of resource there. It's building up all the time. If you can't find something, ask us, and if we can signpost you elsewhere, we will do that. We will be sharing a link to all this in the chat so you can find it nice and easily, but sign up to our monthly e-newsletter, which rounds up all the news. It gives you it's the best place to go to see upcoming events other than the website, and any opportunities relevant to frontline staff that we can promote. If you do one thing today, do that. Register for the updates as well. So I think the update link should be in the chat, and do that. information on the website. But you don't have to take my word for it. Why would you do that? What we'll do is we just love from hearing from colleagues. So don't sit quietly, do communicate us, tell us what you think. Don't be a small cog, but part of that wider group, as this quote says here. The more people take part, the more we can respond, the more we hear from you, the better, the more that we can share, and the more that we can work to build the Frontline network. If you have any questions at all, please just ask. Now, I'm just going to check with the team. Are there any questions for me coming from the chat at this stage I need to know about, or are we okay? There's some in the Q&A. Let me have a look there. I'm glad you reminded me. Okay. Yeah, I've had a question about somebody who wasn't here at the beginning, just asking, will the sessions be available after today? Yes, they will. The sessions have been recorded, and they will be available on the Frontline Network website in the next day or so. People just asked about putting their name on the screen. Yeah, just be quick at coming forward. Use the tools that you've got in front of you. Introduce yourself when you go into sessions. Let us know who's here, and don't be shy in coming forward. Can the training fund only be applied for once by a worker? No. Naomi, my colleague on my right, is just saying no. You can apply many times for that. Each application will be assessed on its individual merits. So yeah, do have a look at that and get some applications in. Yeah, I think we might be receiving a flurry of applications from today, Naomi. So she looks poised and ready. So do have a look at that and do get involved. Okay, and one more question. And is that the same for team applications? Yes, it is. I think that is right as well. That is the same for team applications. Yep. So yeah, don't be slow in coming forward for those as well. Now, let me have a quick look in the chat, see if there's anything else there. I think we're okay. Lots of questions there. Great. You know what? I don't think people who come to our events are shrinking violets. So I suspect during the day we'll be busy with questions. There seems to be a lot happening out there already. Great. So let's move on. I am thrilled that Jean is able to join us. Jean is up in Birmingham in her office, I think. Jean, to many, will need no introduction at all. She is the Chief Executive of St Basil's. And gosh, Jean, it does say 20 years here. Not going to make you feel old straight away, but there we go. Has over 20 years experience of managing housing and neighbourhood services in a number of local authorities in the North East and in the Midlands, and is a member of Birmingham's Housing Partnership Board and Birmingham Social Housing Partnerships Chief Executive. Jean has been the chair of the West Midlands Combined Authority Homelessness Taskforce and is a member of the government's advisory panel on rough sleeping and homelessness, and chairs the National Youth Homelessness Parliament. With all that going on, Jean, we're thrilled that you've made time to be our keynote speaker today. You are most welcome.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Tim. It's a huge honour to be asked, to be honest, if not somewhat a little bit intimidating, I have to say. I think the network is absolutely unique and hugely invaluable to bring together, you know, people from across, you know, the 4 nations, and, you know, really with that experience on the front line, I think it's fantastic. So hats off to yourselves for doing that, and it's as I say, it's a great honour to be asked to kind of make a contribution today. It's worse than the 20 years in local government, Tim, because I've had 22 years in St Basil's. Add them together, I'm very old.
I know.
Very old.
I don't know why we're going here. This is completely unnecessary. We don't need to do it.
Anyway, thank you very much.
I'm going to hand over to you, and then what I think we'll do is we'll come back together at the end and take any questions that we might have, both from the group, and we'll have a look at the chat as well. So, Jean.
Okay, thank you. I think Rachel, your colleague, is very kindly going to share a few slides for me. And I don't want it to be death by PowerPoint, so apologies to people, but it's just kind of some background stuff, and it kind of also helps keep me on track, really. So when I thought about this and the whole theme of working together, you know, I thought fantastic, and so I've kind of called it "They Who Feel It Know It," because I think that's actually what those that are members of the Frontline network, that's what your experience is absolutely invaluable. And you know what's working. I mean, it was brilliant to see some of the feedback there from the survey in terms of people feeling supported. That's fantastic considering the time that we've been through, but also identifying right across the piece those challenges, and that particularly that access to affordable housing. So I wanted to look at the next slide, please, Rachel. I took a quote from the survey, which was actually included in the introduction to this event. And I thought it was really important, because what people are identifying is that no matter how hard you're working to fix things on the front line and to make it work for the people, that there are systemic issues which make it all the more difficult. And I think if we were to ask, if any of us were asked, what do we want people to feel who come to us for support or who use our services? And I don't think any of us would say, I want them to feel like they're being passed from pillar to post. I want them to feel alienated. I want them to feel that they're defined by the system we have. I don't think any of us would say that. And yet, sometimes that's what happens, despite all of our efforts to work together, despite all of our ambitions about making our services accessible and inclusive, that somehow the systems, the way that the structure and the systems work, it doesn't always pan out in the way they would like it to be. So when I saw this, it was kind of like music to my ears, really, when I saw this quote, that this is kind of a movement that's developing, really, that collaboratively, collectively, right across whatever job you're in, we're all feeling this, aren't we? We're feeling that this needs more. There is systemic change that's required. So what I wanted to do, really, just in this time this morning, was just have a little look at what we've been trying to do in the West Midlands, some of the challenges and some of the successes of that. So if we could go to the next slide, please, Rach, thank you. So this is anyone who's in the West Midlands, and I notice you've got Coventry CAB later today, and Kate, who's Chief Exec there, she's part of the Homelessness Taskforce. So this is what we call the plan on the page, really, and it's kind of embedded in a lot of our minds. But back in 2017, when there was Metro Mayor elections, I think those that were elected in those, you know, there was Andy Street in the West Midlands, there was Andy Burnham in Greater Manchester, Steve Rotherham in Liverpool City region. And in 2017, I think all of them heard people, there was such visible homelessness that all of them felt they had to do something about it. And so in the West Midlands, the mayor, Andy Street, was elected there, and he sort of said, I want to do something about it. Lots of people are interested. We need to do something about homelessness. Now, as you will all know, those that don't work in homelessness kind of think you sort of, it's actually quite easy to solve. If I could count, if I had £1 for every time I heard folks saying, oh, you just need to do this, you just need to do that. actually, if it was that easy, we'd have done it. It would have been sorted. The 40 odd years that I've been working in housing and homelessness, you know, we would not have been continuing to deal with the same presenting hardships and issues that people have. So when suddenly you get a new mayor and you've got, right, we need to do something, we're kind of saying, okay, well, what? So the question came back to me to say, well, what should we be doing? Now, the combined authority, certainly in the West Midlands, I know it's slightly different in London, but the combined authority in the West Midlands has no responsibility for homelessness, no resources, no statutory responsibility. That lies with our local authority members. So what is it that we were thinking, what could we do that could add value and not just add work? And so what we did was we said, right, what we really need to look at is how can we start to tackle the systemic issues? How can we make those changes? So we established a steering group which involved all of our local authority leads. It involved public health. It involved police, most of the public services, fire service, health. It involved voluntary and community sector leadership, where there was a regional dimension to it. Violence against women and girls lead, young people. Those areas with crisis as well were involved. So we pulled together, and the business community. And also we have a West Midlands Housing Association partnership. So we pulled those together. So that steering group was kind of cross-sector, cross-region. And what we did was we looked at, okay, our ambition, let's co-design, co-develop this ambition to design out homelessness in the West Midlands, i.e., to make the mainstream, the universal domain, as we would call it, as inclusive as we can, so we can keep people in. And if they start to look like, we can identify when they're going to tumble out, and we can have early contact, early intervention to help them move back into that mainstream, so that we minimize crisis. And if people are in crisis, it's for a very short period, and then we're able to either move back or move on. Now, that kind of model comes from the positive pathway frameworks, the youth frameworks, which St Basil's has developed since 2012 and been refreshed kind of year on year. But it was looking at a whole life course piece. So it was looking at, how does that work? What have we got in the West Midlands in the universal prevention space for children and families, for young people, for older single people? What have we got in targeted, and so on? And in a cutting a very, very long story short, because we took 18 months to map and gap across our region what there was in those spaces for each of those groups, and you can see the task groups below. And fundamentally, what you have is you have an awful lot in crisis, and you have much less in universal and targeted. And then because there's such a lot in crisis, you probably have quite a bit in relation to recovery, move on. Settled home, absolute challenge, as everybody's identified. Now, it's presented here as linear. It's not linear, as you know, it's circular, because to have sufficient, affordable, sustainable, safe homes for people, that's part of the universal prevention. Anyway, we did lots of mapping and gapping. And out of that, we identified what are the priority areas that need addressing and that we need to action plan for in our region. And those amber boxes along the bottom, they're kind of everything distilled down, and there was loads, but everything distilled down into those 5. So affordable supply, absolute edge of it. And we don't mean affordable, the definition of a product, sort of 80% of market rent. We need affordable, a definition which relates to people's incomes. So one of the great things that the Combined Authority done has actually developed that definition. So any development that has any resource from the West Midlands Combined Authority for housing will have to use that definition. And that definition is nuanced to its specific areas where people live and people's incomes. Tackling welfare-related poverty, the poverty, the benefit poverty. We absolutely argued the case that the £20 should not be taken off, but it is. So you now have, for example, young people, universal credit rate is below destitution level for young people on a weekly living allowance of £59.38. How on earth can you make ends meet, and when you have some of, you know, the least experienced, poorest citizens with the least support. And that's it. And it's the same across the piece. But it was also about LHA levels. It was great because they kind of went up for a period and then they were frozen again, and now that they've gone back. So you get the unintended consequences of landlords saying we can't make this stack up in private rented, and so the pushes people back, waiting more and more for social housing, insufficient social housing. Good employment. That was really about ensuring that, you know, people that they have secure employment, that they are able to, the employers understand the wider implications of how people need to live and work, that pay was fair, that they weren't exploited and abused. And we worked with business and the community and developed a toolkit, a commitment to collaborate to prevent and relieve homelessness toolkit for businesses, so that they themselves could work through how can we contribute to this preventing homelessness, because good employment is such an important part of that. Information, advice and guidance. You'd think that would be the easiest. It's not, because so much has been cut from IAG systems and you know, CABs. You think about CABs, they are saying they can deal with about 1 in 4 calls, and increasingly those calls are around people that have housing challenges, as well as the other elements that relate to homelessness. So IAG really, really hard in terms of tackling that. And then the 5th one was around integrated prevention. And this comes back to the theme of working together, collaborating, not working in silos where you end up with kind of hot potato cases that are passed between different parts of the system. So we have been working on this since 2017. We're 5 years in now, and our determination now is absolutely about that system change. We've done loads of decent projects. We've brought over 17 million into the region. We've had over 520 people housed through Housing First. Lots of good things, which is brilliant. And I do not, you know, underplay those at all. But fundamentally, this task force was trying to achieve some systems change. And I have to say, that is the hardest thing, and we're still doing it. But what we want to do is ensure that those mainstream, the regional mainstream strategies, are inclusive strategies, that they keep people in, and that it's everybody's responsibility. We want to be able to influence central government and make recommendations and show them through evidence what works and what needs to change nationally. And then it's that learning to and from with our local authorities and our other partners in the region. I've put the link at the bottom because we did also develop a commitment to collaborate toolkit using this model, the pathway model. It's a free resource. You can access it, and it's great to use within organizations or partnerships. Thanks, Rach. Now, complexity is a given, really, but complicated we do ourselves. We make things complicated. And actually, I'm a great lover of simplicity. I really think that if we can, and I don't mean oversimplify, I don't mean being unrealistic, but if we can make things as straightforward and as simple as possible, then we're more likely for people to feel that they can remain included. So we kind of talk about it, it's like a table. And this first came actually from a business person who was doing a kind of seeing is believing thing for other business people many years ago, production manager at Cadbury's he was actually. And he described it, he was trying to tell other business people about homelessness. He said, I think of it like a table. He said, I think that if you've got you're working, or you've got a sustainable means of paying your way, earning your income, then one of those legs of your table is pretty solid. If you've got good physical, mental health or access to the support that you need in order to achieve that, another leg's fairly solid. If you have secure, safe, affordable accommodation, home, third leg is solid. And then if you have safe, supportive, loving relationships, whether it's part of a care system, whether it's friends, family, community, then your table is pretty solid. Once your table's solid, you can build on it. Now, if many of us have support behind those 4 legs, so, you know, many of us, if we lose our job, we're not going to end up homeless. It's not going to knock on. But for lots of people, they're fairly fragile, those elements behind. So one thing can happen, it can impact on another, it can impact on another, and it can actually tumble over. I think it's quite a helpful way to present particularly to parts of the system that only focus on one element, because it shows that actually we have to operate together in order for that table to be solid for people. And I think it also kind of takes out this them and us, because we all need this. You know, we're all people. Now, some of us have got resources, we've got choices, as I said, we've got networks behind. Some haven't, and then they tip into part of the system. Now, could be a mental health system, could be housing, but once they tip into the system, sometimes you start to become defined by the system, and you lose the kind of people piece, and you're thought of as a bit different. So I think this is really important for us. Things that work for all of us can often work for everybody. The tools, the coaching, you know, the access to resources that work for all of us, the education system that has a housing offer underpinning it. If it works for all of us, why can't it work for everybody? And why don't we try to develop a system that in that universal space that does actually work for all of us as people? Thanks, Rach. Now, this is really showing that there are kind of, if you take a young person, you can do it for children and families, you can do it for older singles. We've kind of done it for all, but it's almost taking those four legs of the table in those circles, and it's looking at, you know, what are the risk factors that can impact on those, and how do they compound each other so that you end up people falling out and being excluded. And what are the protective factors that we can bring in? Might be our individual systems, it might be collectively. What are the protective factors that help keep people included, keep their table solid, if you like? And I think it's about all of us looking at what part do we have to play in this, and how can we make sure that we reduce the risk factors and we enhance and improve the protective factors. Thanks, Rachel. Because what then happens, you see, if you look at the blue cycle, this sort of represents a lot of our systems at the moment, that what we end up with is, you know, we have a lot of silo services that have whole different governance systems that are commissioned in different ways, that are very, you know, that they're very focused on what they have to achieve. They've got their own language, you know, they've got their own cultures, they've got their own processes, they've got all of that, and they don't necessarily talk to each other. So a lot of, when you're working with somebody, and I know because our colleagues see it all the time, you know, you can have a situation where you say, again, young person, you have a young person who's maybe got mental health issues, can't access the mental health services because got drug and alcohol issues, can't access drug and alcohol because got mental health issues, can't access either because they've got nowhere to live, can't access accommodation because their needs are too complex and they're not being met. So you end up with these hot potato cases that fall down through our systems. And actually just finding your way, navigating your way, you've got to be fairly switched on or have somebody that's assisting you, because there are multiple access routes. Individually, those systems can have quite high access thresholds. Certainly we see it in transition from, if a young person is involved with children's services, that transition, if they need adult services support, that's a significantly different threshold. So transition to adulthood isn't really about growing up, which you might think it is. It's about transitioning from one set of services and one system to another. And that can be quite a big gap. Sometimes there's generic approaches. So there's not the specialisms, there's not the understanding, you know, in relation to, you know, that skill set, particularly youth-focused services. So young people can be in with all sorts of different age groups, maybe, you know, not the understanding necessarily within the provider system about what's happening here and what is happening during that adolescence and what adolescence is all about. And then that can lead to people falling out, and you get that multiple exclusion. And ultimately, that's increased social and financial costs for everyone. So if that system, if we know that system doesn't work, then what would better look like? So what we're trying to achieve is that, so that instead of the silos, you have integrated, accessible services. Now, I think Tim mentioned on one of these, somebody had mentioned about engaging with DWP and how that they were really responsive. And that's been our experience. We have DWP embedded in our youth hubs and embedded in a number of our accommodation services. And just having people working with you, and their focus is on ensuring the best possible outcome for the young person. We've also got children's services and statutory homeless services, drug and alcohol services in our youth hub in Birmingham. And again, everybody's there working around the needs of the young person. Now, all of us have organisational expectations, but when you work together and your focus is around the needs of the person, and all the feedback that's come back from Fulfilling Lives and other programs is that if you focus on what the person requires and you're not distracted too much by what your organisation is requiring you to do, and that depends what the commissioners are requiring them to do, and it's a whole cycle. But if you're allowed to focus on the needs of the person and work together to achieve that, then it's far better for everyone. I think the other issue is around that upstream. When we talk about prevention now, often, particularly when government's major focus is on ending rough sleeping. So prevention is now discussed within the context of preventing rough sleeping. And that can be preventing it from happening the night before it's about to. But what we're talking about in this system change is really upstream, is that universal prevention, that much earlier. So both having universal prevention and targeted prevention early, but also making our mainstream systems inclusive for everyone, not just for those of us that can navigate and manage our way around it, but looking at it and making it inclusive for everyone. I think we've learned through the whole COVID years that actually, if we're serious about wanting to make change, we can do it. We can do it fairly quickly. We can adapt our process so that they serve our purpose. But sadly, too often, we revert back then to we're driven by process. Sometimes we lose sight of what the purpose is because the process is about protection. It's about defending. It's about protecting organisations. It's about protecting public money. But then what is it achieving at all if it forgets what it's there for in the first place? So it's cannot underestimate how important process focusing on purpose is. And if we do those things, we are more likely to have inclusion, capital I, capital N, keeping people in. And if we can keep people in, then we're more likely to have reduced social and financial costs for all. Thanks, Rach. So if we can do that, why is it so flipping hard? Why is it so hard that there's great examples all the time? You'll hear them all day today. You'll all be aware of them in your own work. Why can't we hardwire it? Why is it so difficult to hardwire systemic change and an inclusive environment that we all can operate within? And I think sometimes it's unintended consequences. Sometimes I'd be less benign. I'm not so sure that they are unintended. Sometimes it is around behavioural economics. Sometimes it is around people operating in silos, operating in their own bubbles, whereby they only know their own experience and they don't listen to what other people's experiences are, and they make decisions based on that. Conscious, unconscious bias, all sorts of things, and then layered upon layered with structural inequalities. So I think all of those things can have an impact. And I think at the moment we are in that situation. We have shown we can do things differently, but it's a period as well when probably not for a very, very long time have we come through this kind of traumatic period collectively. And I do think there is a kind of almost a collective post-traumatic stress that's happening where people are rethinking what's important to me, what I want for my life, how do I want to do it. And it's happening at the same time as contextual and external, very, very serious situations, war, climate issues, massive cost of living crisis. So So it's a period of churn. I've heard it referred to as a liminal zone, where, you know, the old rules don't quite work, but we haven't quite established the new ones yet. So there is potential, there is possibility of doing things differently and better. I think sometimes it's been about, you know, sort of behavioral economics around, oh, we need to make work pay. Yeah, well, you can do that by paying good work and paying well, or you can do it by cutting benefits, so people have very little choice. And often it has opposite effects, and people who have resources don't always understand what those are. You know, we're seeing right to buy being pushed now, and we're hearing the case that right to buy, there will be a 1-for-1 replacement. Well, the pilot that took place in the West Midlands showed there was only 65% replacement for those properties that were sold, and often that replacement wasn't possible in the area where the property was sold. So again, it's those kind of really thinking. I do think there ought to be impact assessments on all policy, which looks at the unintended consequences. I think the other thing is we've gone this focus from prevention down to crisis. And I think what we know is if you only focus on crisis, you'll just get more crisis, because everybody has to be in crisis before they get the help they need. And if we don't look at stretching away from crisis and upstream, and then the kind of affordable homes piece as well, then we're just going to get more and more crisis. And the thing we do know is that all of the research shows that late spend is always more expensive than early. So, you know, it will get more and more expensive, and then we'll get more and more tiny definitions of what crisis is. That's the challenge, the danger. And then we see when you've got unmet need, you get market adaptations. You've got private landlords who can't make things stack up for people on benefits. So in many areas of the country, I know it's not the case in all, but in many areas of the country, you've got this huge shift to the non-commissioned exempt supporters sector. And certainly our experience in Birmingham, and it's happening in all sorts of other parts of the country, whereas, you know, it's very difficult. Where is the support there? So you get people trapped long term in very high rents, unable to work, not receiving the support that they require, and much of it's funded by government. So all of those things can lead to further exclusion. Thanks, Rach. So what works and what gets in the way? And I've just kind of, you know, there'll be loads of things, and you folks will know yourselves. But I've kind of looked at some of the obstacles, and some of them, you know, I've kind of talked about already, but they're probably no surprises to you. You know, the kind of playing shops, I call it. You know, where instead of looking collectively and co-designing what is it that we're trying to achieve, and having what is the asset, the resources that we can bring to the table to work together in order to achieve that, we have massive procurement and commissioning processes which separate people off, which put them in competition with each other. And you know, we end up not making the best use of the resource and the asset we've got, because it's not always about more money. A lot of the time it is about making better use of what we have. And ultimately, often you then get parts of the system which say they can do marvelous things, you know. So you get commissioners who have, you know, I'd call it Rolls-Royce ambitions, but they've only got mini money. So they put this marvelous specification out, which is what they want to achieve. And then you've got providers thinking, whoa, okay, well, if I put the real price in for that, that's not going to be successful. So we overpromise, and then we would underdeliver. I'm not saying we would do that or you would, but that's what tends to happen. And then risks get shunted all the way down, and people get failed. And ultimately, that's how you get modern slavery. Risks get shunted down. So I think, you know, it's the issues about what can we do that makes things, you know, not that way. There is more prevention focus, more inclusive, more of the person's life course, not the system's life course. And I think, you know, co-designing, my experience is absolutely from the beginning, co-design, strategic, operational level. So you're very clear what your objectives are. You're very clear what you're collectively measured on, that you have open book approaches. You can see, you know, if someone has to make a certain return, if things cost the way they do, particularly now, let's be honest about it up front, so it doesn't result in disappointment. And if we're doing research, let's not wait until a year after the program or the pilot has been run and then say what should have happened. Let's build in action research as we go, so that actually we're learning and we can plan, do, review at some speed, and improve things, and not blame. Actually look at what are we all learning from this and what we are putting in. And I think, you know, having the you know, they who know it, they who feel it know it, embedded all the way through is really important. And I've kind of talked about collaborative leadership, and I know it can be like a, oh, that sounds all right, we all do that. No, we don't. What does it mean to rise above your own organization's requirements and really look at what is collaborative? And that might mean enabling another organization, another team, another partner to do things because they can do it better than you can. And I think those enablers lead to inclusion, capital I, capital N, rather than exclusion. Thanks, Rach. You'll be glad this is my last one. So coming back to the original slide and that quote, working together. And I think it's, you know, we've all got parts to play, whatever role you have in the system, and we'll all be in different roles at different times. Book I read many years ago called Seeing Systems by Barry Oshry. Recommend it to you. It's a real human systems thinking, and it kind of talks about us all different times. We might be, you know, what we might be top, middle, or bottom within a system, and it will be different in different spaces. We also might be the receiver, the customer of that system. And it's basically saying, you know, if you're the leader or whatever, then you can feel sometimes the pressure to take all the decisions and, you know, subsume that power, particularly when things are going wrong. If you're in the middle of that system, you might feel the pressure, you know, that your role is to integrate. But actually, you might feel, well, I've really got to please my boss a bit more than I have to please my colleagues, and you get stuck in that. And then if you're on the front line, then you are constantly trying to fix things that have gone pear-shaped elsewhere. And I think it's really about, we're all part of systems. We're all part of systems, but we all have a really important part to play to ensure that that is understood, to respect each other, to work across those systems, and to speak up so that we can actually learn from that and make the best use we can of the resources, the skills, the knowledge, the assets that we all have. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean. What a joy to hear your passion for this and the drive that you've got. And you're talking to an audience, you said from the outset, you're talking to an audience of people who know what's working. So thank you for that, because I think actually these messages are so important. Everything that you've said today, I think, will resonate with people across here. Applause are swinging across we've got a bit of time to take some questions. Do put your questions in the Q&A box there. Any other observations that you've got, just pop in the chat, and I think Jean and I can see those. Words like awesome and inspirational are appearing at the moment. Can I just start off with one question, really, which what you're describing is very dependent on building really effective relationships with people, and system change comes when you begin to enter into relationships where other people can see that change is required, and often where they're working in their own silos or doing their own thing, they think they're doing very well. It takes real skill to build relationships and trust. So I'm interested to know, you know, our theme today is all around working together, but what are some of the relationships that you've most valued in your work in housing and homelessness, and how have you managed to build and engender those relationships, perhaps with people who are great people, but maybe in a different place to you because of, you know, the constraints of their work and their role?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, Tim, and it's you used the word trust, And I think that's fundamentally, you know, the kind of old saying of sort of trust is built in inches and lost in yards.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, because trustworthiness, being trustworthy, worthy of other people's trust, we've all got to think about what that means. Now, when you're working together with people and you're working across systems, you're working with people that have very different views, you know, views that you might not share. You know, sometimes you might want to do the like grasp by the scruff of the neck and a good shake, but it's trust and respect, okay? Because I think actually trying to understand and not be defensive and not attack is where are they coming from? What is their starting point? What has their experience been? And then how do you work from that? So that how do you then kind of bring those different perspectives together and then co-design what it is you want to achieve together, okay? Because then you will hold each other to account and yourself. And I know a lot, you know, I've seen some work which was done on partnerships, and what they were saying that 64% of partnerships fail, not because of the structures, not because of the relationships. Exactly. Because it's a bit kind of, you know, the sort of like, I'll have a bit of yours, but what's mine's my own. and I think, you know, that's when it doesn't work, because people sense that. I mean, working in a combined authority, when you've got 7 local authorities who are constituent members and different politics, Conservative authorities, Labour authorities, Conservative mayor, Conservative government. Really, we have a members advisory group. The cabinet members for the 7 local authorities work together to help the Taskforce overcome barriers. They work together brilliantly because we're really focused on, you know, playing the ball, not the person. Sorry, I keep using all these things because I've been around for a very long time. But you know what I mean? That's and it is that you have to rise above all of those things. You have to rise above those, and for me as an individual, then the relationships, it's value in all of those. But I need people that tell me the truth. I need people that tell me when I'm going off on one. I need people that are actually and some of my personal most trusted relationships, most valued, are colleagues that will say to me, gee, you might think that, but just go and sort of calm yourself down a bit and then, you know, come back out again. And you need that. We all need that. We all need that.
I think that's completely true. And I'm interested to know, do you feel optimistic now that you've got, you know, you've described a framework that's beginning to work, that you're seeing change coming through. You've said, you know, systemic change is going to take a very long time, but based on the experience you've had it in Birmingham, in the West Midlands, the model that you've derived, does that fill you with optimism, as though there is a way of navigating through that and change is possible?
Yes, I do. I do. But I think it takes a massive movement. Okay. Yeah. And I think it takes a movement for all of us to be saying, no, this is not acceptable. When we're seeing some of the decisions that are being taken, you know, across the world and moving people in different directions, and when we're seeing separating people, you know, and creating them and us, you know, sort of, I think it's going to take all of us, because there are huge forces that are pushing the other way, you know, at different levels. So, but I also hear people talking, just like, you know, the network response has been, we need system change. We need to, you know, sort of speak up for what's really important. We need to work together. We need allies. We need to make sure that we have not, you know, people are not just, you know, dispensable, that actually we do have an inclusive system that works for all. And I see that, I see much more people talking using that kind of language. Then we have to make it happen. So yeah, eternally optimistic, Tim, eternally optimistic.
I think that's good. I think that's good. Yeah, it's a challenging time ahead, isn't it? And yeah, you know, today we have people, frontline workers, and you said right from the outset, these are people who know what works. And I'm interested to know what advice you might give to frontline workers who feel, you know, they're down there, we're doing our thing. How do they begin to share those messages, things that work within their work context? You know, often people feel that their voice is is not heard. Someone just said in the chat, you know, Housing First is working all over the world. You know, that people have these things. There are things out there that are working, but as frontline workers, where do you take those messages and ensure that those people who make bigger decisions know that there's a route to frontline workers?
Yeah. Yes, and I think, you know, it's not being afraid to speak up. It's finding allies, isn't it? Whether that's in your own organisation, whether that's through the network, whether that's, you know, in partnership relationships that you're working, you know, having those conversations. I also see, you know, that the kind of the power thing is that you do end up, you know, people think, oh, best not say anything, I best keep quiet. Then managers try to appease, and then, you know, sort of leaders, you know, make decisions and, you know, sort of locked rooms kind of thing. You know, that's, we have to open up together. We have to hear what's being said. And I think creating those forums, and that's why I talk about collaborative leadership. Leadership has to take responsibility for ensuring that happens. Otherwise, they're going to continue going down those silo routes and nothing's going to change. So absolutely, I do think that wherever you are in that system, speak up, have those things, be constructive, you know, be constructive, and make sure that whether it's, you know, your managers, your commissioners, whatever, that you are saying, look, let's look at this in a different way. Because you have the most critical expertise and experience to bring to the table on that. And I think, you know, that has to be heard and valued.
Yeah, and we're just seeing that come through in some of the comments here, that, you know, multi-agency approaches are the way forward. You know, that's got to be the way that we've got to work forward. You know, so many organizations are bound by commissioning and you know, prevent working together to get the money. Sometimes you've got that same old thing still happening all over the place. There's complications around sharing. You know, someone's mentioned the dreaded letters GDPR and, you know, sharing around that. Difficulties within that, but fundamentally, as a mind shift, a way of working, that is, I think, the direction we need to go with. Can I take a couple of just specific questions as well? Sure. You talked about a model which I think was, let me make sure I jotted it down, Positive Pathways Framework. Is that right? Is that something we can direct people towards that they can look at?
Absolutely. I can put a link in the chat. Yeah.
Okay. A second, I think, fascinating question is whether people have got links, maybe Eugene or others have, of evidence that shows that early spend is always better value than later spend. Yeah. Interventions and where that works. Yeah.
Again, I think there's various, but certainly I know there was work done around mental health, and University of Birmingham did some really important work which showed that, you know, the cost of not dealing with things early, it accumulates. I mean, just one example of something, and this is just me kind of, because I'm passionate about this. We will look at young people, you know, part of the difficulty getting work is if they have no family support. Doing an apprenticeship, if you can't live in a family home where you don't pay any rent, all the rest of it, it's really difficult. So the young people that were coming to us, 17% of them are working when they come. We're talking 4,000 a year, 17. They lose the job because they end up in the system. Yeah. So we wanted a housing offer where young people could live and work, keep it simple, be benefit free. We worked out what would you have to deflate the rents to in order to achieve that? It was £42 a week, right? Now, we ended up with loads of partners, with the NHS Trust, with buildings, with Homesing, with all sorts. We have a scheme since 2015, the rents are £43 a week. Since then, 120 young people have lived there. Every single one of them is working. Not a single one has claimed a penny benefit in that time, and they're all working. What is that contributing longer term, intergenerationally to the system?
Unbelievable.
So, do you know what I mean? But the thing is, it's like, okay, it's proof of concept. Why is the system not like doing? Okay, let's do more of that. Let's make it simple for young people so they can concentrate on what's important for their futures and their families. And, you know, anyway. Plan for it. You know, the thing is, to me, we're always doing the crap. We're always planning for what we're trying to avoid. We need to plan for what we want to achieve, not just what we want to avoid. Anyway, need to get rid of me now, Tim, because I'm like, I can go on.
I could, I'm looking at the time. We could carry on talking all day. We've just one little bit of housekeeping to do. What was that book again that you recommended?
It's
Barry?
Seeing Systems, and it's Barry Oshry, Oshry.
Lovely. We'll put that in the chat and people can pick that up. That's everybody's homework and recommended reading. If you want to kind of channel some of...
It's a long time since I read it.
If you want to channel some of Jean's passion, that's as good a start point as any, I guess. Hey, thank you very much for the session this morning. We have run out of time. People will move on to their next session. I hope people know what they're doing. Contact us if you don't. Jean, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. It's been inspirational this morning. And I think you've got our conference today off to an extraordinarily brilliant start.
Brilliant. And my day as well. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
We'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody.